Hello, folks. Welcome to UDL Express Images. We're going to get started with why describe images. Now, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, an inaccessible picture says nothing at all. Accessible images support access for screen reader users, enables non-visual access to meaning and context. It's certainly very helpful in low bandwidth or error-prone environments. We describe images using alt text, which is a gateway to meaning for screen reader users, low bandwidth users, and others. First, we need to think about why are we even using images? What's your intentionality of using images? Images can serve many different roles. Some are there to illustrate a concept like a diagram or a process map or a mind map. Others are included to evoke emotion or set the tone, like a powerful photo in a discussion forum or banner. Sometimes we use visuals to reinforce key ideas, like a visual metaphor to drive home a central theme. In other cases, images support navigation, such as icons or buttons that help users know what to do next. And sometimes images are just there to make the page look nice. They serve as a decorative function and don't carry any instructional meaning. An example is the image circle icon on this slide. The image circle icon is marked as decorative because it doesn't convey new or meaningful information beyond what's already on the slide. It's used purely for visual interest and layout balance. And a screen reader user would already get the context from my slide title and bullet points. So hearing image of a mountain and sun actually adds no value and creates unnecessary noise. That's why the purpose of the image is very important. It determines how or even if you should describe it. And not every image needs alt text, but every image needs a decision. So let's move on to what should alt text say. I've talked about the term alt text a couple of times, so let's define it. An alt text is a short description added to an image so screen readers can convey its meaning. So it's added to the image's metadata. An alt text describes the function and meaning of the image, not just the appearance. We want to try to keep our alt text concise, accurate, and relevant to the context. Now, there's many guidance around this. Some websites will say keep your alt text under 125 characters. Some will say 150. Some will say 120. I would say think about concision, because if, let's say, you have a screen reader that's reading this alt text, you don't want the alt text to actually interrupt the flow of information. You also don't need to use words such as image of or picture of, because the screen reader already notes that what they're reading is an image. We also try to avoid repeating nearby text, because what would happen, especially when you use a screen reader, is you just hear the same text over and over. If the image is purely decorative, mark it as such so the screen readers know to skip it. Tools like PowerPoint, Word, and Quarkus have built-in alt text fields or decorative checkboxes, which we're going to look at in the How section. So I'm going to show you a slide with an image and various alt text depending on context. Earlier, I mentioned my background was in art history, so I thought it might be fun to show you an illustration that shows up in a 14th century manuscript. And the caption states, Knight on horseback and the fallen opponent from l'Histoire de Merlin, France, circa 1316, British Library, ad manuscript 10292, folio 213 recto. So that's the caption. The caption is not the same as the alt text. The caption often gives information such as location, who the photographer was, etc. But let's look at the alt text. If I included this image in my art history lecture, the alt text may say, medieval illustration from l'Histoire de Merlin showing a mountain knight defeating a fallen opponent, part of the 14th century Lancelot Grail cycle. This information is useful for my students who are in the context of an art history class, because we're looking at art from different periods throughout history, and we're also looking at thematically what is being represented and whether or not this image came from a specific source. However, if I were teaching a cultural studies seminar, whether or not this came from a 14th century manuscript isn't as important. So instead, the alt text might say, two medieval knights on horseback, One horse viewed head-on is egg-shaped and awkwardly drawn, popularly known online as the egg horse. Maybe this is a course about meme culture, and this is certainly a manuscript illumination that shows up quite often in meme culture. For a digital humanities project, it's definitely important for our participants to know where this image actually comes from. So here, British Library at manuscript 10292, folio 213 recto becomes a critical information to include in the alt text, and then a brief description of the iconography, depiction of mounted knights striking down opponent, stylistic rendering of horses typical of early 14th century French Gothic manuscripts. And finally, for our UDL Express session, our context is different. So the alt text may be a medieval manuscript image of a knight on horseback and the fallen opponent, used here to show how alt text varies depending on context. Do you see how each of the alt texts is somewhat related, but is geared differently depending on what our context is, what is the function and meaning, and why this image is included here. Let's move on to the how to add alt text. The how has been facilitated by the programs that we work in. So first, let's talk about how do you add alt text in PowerPoint and Word. There's only 3 steps. 1, right-click the image. 2, select Edit Alt Text. 3, enter your alt text. That's it. The hardest thing is actually coming up with the alt text. So asking yourself, wait, why did I include this image? What do I want my users to know if they cannot see the image, what are information they still need to know? If it's decorative though, there's actually a little checkbox you can mark that says mark as decorative. On Quercus, it's only 3 steps as well. So in Quercus, you have the rich content editor. Within the rich content editors, click the image, select image options, enter your alt text. Again, if it's decorative, you just check the decorative image box. So what are our big takeaways for today? First, use alt text to describe meaning. Second, write alt text that is short, specific, and contextual. And lastly, mark decorative images as decorative.